Good morning guys, since we're into December and I'm feeling very festive, I decided today I will bake some mince pies. So I figured I would go through the recipe with you in case you also want to make some yourself. So here, I'll just run through everything quickly. This is everything you will need apart from a fridge and an oven because I'm obviously not going to move them to my worktops. So here we have an empty mixing bowl. In this bowl here we have 75 grams of lard and 75 grams of butter. I have cubed them just so that it's easier to work with. We have 350 grams of plain flour. We have a little bit of cold water. We also have a little bit of salt. We have some empty baggies. They will be to put this mixture into before it goes into the fridge. We have a rolling pin, some cookie cutters in various shapes and sizes. We have 560 grams of mincemeat. We've got a tray to put our mince pies into. We also have a cooling rack for when they're out of the oven. We have some icing sugar and this guy just to put the icing sugar on to decorate. We have a little bit of milk as well as a brush to put the milk onto the top of the mince pies. And we have some butter just to grease this tin so that the mince pies don't get stuck. So let's get started with stage number 1. Now I'll just move some of these about before we get started. The first thing you're going to do is pop your flour into your mixing bowl. To that you want to add a pinch of salt. Let's take a pinch and perhaps a little bit more. Then we're going to get messy, so you might want to pull up your sleeves for this. You're just going to mix to make sure that the salt is all incorporated. And once that's done, you're going to add your lard and your butter to this mixture. This next step is important because what you want to do is use the tips of your fingers to handle this. You don't want the mixture getting too hot, and if you use the palms of your hand, it can. So just taking the tops of your fingers, you're just going to crumb the lard and the butter into your flour until you make some kind of dough form. If you need to add water, go ahead once it's obviously incorporated a bit and add it in. I won't be doing that until I know how much I actually need, and I'll come back and show you once this is looking somewhat like dough. As you should be able to see, our dough is looking kind of like breadcrumbs. It has breadcrumb consistency, and if you put your hands in and squeeze it together, it will take shape. Obviously it's just going to crumble if you do anything to it. So this is where you need to add some water. With this stage, don't forget that you can always add more water, but you're not going to be able to take it out. So I would recommend just adding a little bit at a time, mixing it together and then seeing if you do need some more. And then again, I do need a bit more, so I'm going to keep adding and I'll show you once we've got the right consistency. As you'll see, this has now turned into more of a dough form. So the next thing you want to do is take it out of your bowl and you're going to split it in half. This doesn't need to be exact, so don't worry. Then we're going to take our bag, pop half into one bag, half into the other. Then you're just going to seal them up. And these will go into your fridge for about half an hour. So once they've been chilled, I'll come back and show you the next step. It's now half an hour later and I've removed one bag of dough. The other bag is still in the fridge, keeping cool whilst we work on this section. We also have a rolling pin and some cookie cutters. Now this next thing is something I did forget to mention earlier, and that is some greaseproof or parchment paper. You will need 2 sheets of this. The reason for this is we're going to pop the dough onto the sheet, then use another piece of parchment to go on top, and we will be rolling the dough in between the parchment paper. This just makes it easier so it doesn't stick to the surface, doesn't stick to the rolling pin, and if at any point it gets too warm, we can just pop it flat as it is straight back into the fridge and take it out in a little while. So the next thing you're going to do is take your rolling pin and just start to flatten down your dough. Now because it is really cold, this isn't going to be as easy as it would if it was just normal warm dough. So just press down first so that you have it kind of flat. And if you do get creases in the paper, don't worry, you can always lift it, turn it over and push back down. And you want to get your dough quite thin. I would say maybe 1/2 centimetre. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to straighten all of this dough out, and I'll come back when it's at the right thickness just to show you the next step. I've now flattened this first piece of dough. As you can see, it is quite thin. So the next thing we need to do is to take our cookie cutters. Now, you should have one that's about 3 inches and one that's about 2.5 inches. I'm not entirely sure which ones my pan will need, so I'm going to start out with this one, and then I can always go bigger or smaller if need be. So just press down into your dough, and then you're going to take the shape out. Now I'm going to pop these back onto my greaseproof paper once I've cut them out, and I'll pop them back into the fridge just to cool down before I do move on to the next step, just to keep them as I want them. This first batch of the bases of my mince pies are done, and they've been in the fridge for about 5 minutes just to cool them back down, and I've obviously taken them back out. So the next thing we need to do, we're going to push these to the side for a second and take our baking tray. Now this is where you take the butter that we have left over, and we're just going to grease the baking tray. Now it's up to you what you decide to use to do this. I prefer using my hand so I can make sure I get it everywhere it needs to be. And you're just going to continue the same process through all 12 sections of your baking tray. All sections of this tray have now been greased, so what you want to do next is to start preheating your oven, and you'll need it at 200 degrees centigrade or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the next thing we need to do is to take these bottom sections of our mince pies, and you're just going to mould them into your tray. Be very careful because obviously you don't want to make a hole in the bottom of your mince pie. And you're going to continue the same thing with all 12, and once you're done, I'll come back and show you the next step. And here we have the base of our mince pies are all ready to go. So you need to take your mince pie filling, and for anybody who isn't from the UK and doesn't know what this is, it is not meat. It's a load of fruit and nuts and everything all mixed together to make a nice sweet dessert or treat. Now what you need to do is take this filling and you're just going to pop it into the centre. Now it is important that you don't overfill these, because when you put the top on it may not fit and then you're going to have it spilling everywhere in your oven. So just put a little dollop into the centre of each of your mince pie cases, like so. Once I've filled all of these up, I'll be back again to show you the next step. Now all 12 of our mince pies are filled, it's time to make the lids. So you're going to continue the same process you did with the bases, however you're obviously going to make the lids a little bit smaller, so I will be using a smaller cookie cutter. So I'm going to go ahead, pull it out of the fridge, put it on some greaseproof paper, straighten it out, cut out my shapes, pop it back into the fridge, and then I'll meet you back here in a second for you, which will probably be about 20 minutes for me. See you soon. As you can see, the tops are all ready to go. Now with this next step, you may want to take a little more water and just add some onto your finger and run it around the seam where both parts of the dough will meet. Then you're going to take your top section and just flatten it down on your mince pie. You're going to do that for every single one, and like usual, I'll be back with you once that's done. As you can see, all of the tops are on our mince pies, so the next thing to do is to take the little brush and just brush some milk onto the top of each one. It's very simple, and all this does is just makes them nice and golden brown once they're in the oven. And now this next step is completely optional, but I would advise doing it just because it lets the steam out so you don't end up with your mince pie filling everywhere. Is just pierce a couple of little holes into the top of each one. Once that's done, you need to pop them into your oven, which should be nice and warm by now, and you're going to leave them in there for between 25 and 30 minutes, just until they're nice and golden brown. So once they're all cooked, I'll come back and show you what's next. I've just taken out the mince pies from the oven, and as you can see, or probably hear, they are boiling hot. So I'm going to leave them in the tin for about 10 minutes just to let them cool down a little bit before I take them out and pop them onto this tray underneath. The mince pies have cooled down enough that I've been able to transfer them onto a cooling rack, so that all that's left to do now is take some icing sugar and sprinkle it on top. Now I'm going to leave them completely cool and then serve them on a plate. And here you have it, the delicious mince pies. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe and come back to see more videos throughout the festive season. Thanks for watching. Bye!